Years before I retired, I thought money was just one big number. I believed the largest account would give me the safest life. But after living through market crashes and recoveries, I changed. Retirement taught me that a portfolio must do more than grow. It must support you when the monthly paycheck finally stops. That is why I went back and tested one simple question. What happens if $10,000 sits in three Fidelity funds for 30 years? One version was projected to grow to nearly $700,000. Another version projected over $2,000 a month in income. Same starting money, same three funds, same 30-year clock. The difference was not the fund list, but the way they were mixed. That was the lesson I wish I had understood decades earlier. Before we go further, remember, this is only a projection, not a promise. But the math shows a conflict that every investor needs to see early. When I was younger, I wasted too much time chasing the best fund. I thought one perfect choice would solve the entire retirement puzzle. But age teaches you that the tool is only part of the machine. The real question is how much weight each tool receives. So I used three simple pieces, each with a different job. One fund was meant to create income when work eventually ended. One fund was meant to chase growth while time was still on my side. And one fund was meant to keep me from betting everything on America. The strange part was that the bigger account did not pay better income. Later, you will have to ask yourself a tough question. Would you rather own the bigger account or the account that sends you more cash? An index fund is just a basket of stocks following a strict rule. The fund just owns the index. No managers trying to guess winners. The fees stay near zero, which is why they work for long-term compounding. Dividend funds never excited me when I was still building wealth. They looked slow, quiet, and too boring for someone chasing growth. But later in life, boring income started to look very different. FDVV became the part of the model built to send cash back. It tracks large and mid-cap US companies that actively grow their payouts. The top holdings are companies like Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, and Broadcom. These tech giants became so massive that even a small payout is enormous. Apple alone paid out over $15 billion in dividends last year. So FDVV isn't holding dying businesses just to chase a high yield. It holds highly profitable businesses that are returning cash to shareholders. Historically, FDVV runs at a 2.8% dividend yield. It has a 5-year dividend growth rate of 10.85%, and the average share price has appreciated at 9.16% annually. This became the foundational income engine for the model. FNCMX reminded me of the years when growth felt like everything. When markets were rising, funds like this made investors feel smart. But growth also teaches humility when prices fall at the wrong time. So I used it as the engine for size, not the engine for income. It tracks roughly 3,000 companies heavily weighted toward technology. Remember, the Nasdaq is just the exchange where these tech giants list. The top holdings here are Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Amazon, and Meta. But the weights are much heavier here than in the dividend fund. Tech stocks make up about 50% of this entire index. The historical data reflects that aggressive nature. FNCMX gives you a tiny dividend yield of just 0.48%. The dividend growth rate sits right at 6.91%, but the annual share price appreciation is a staggering 17.45%. In this model, 17.45% was the strongest growth assumption. FTIHX was the fund I resisted most when I looked at the list. International stocks had looked weak for so long that I almost skipped them. But retirement changes how you think about things that look boring. I did not want my entire future tied to one country and one market. FTIHX tracks over 5,000 stocks across developed and emerging markets. You are buying companies like Taiwan Semiconductor, Nestle, and ASML. It does not guarantee safety, but it reduces the portfolio's dependence on one market. And FTIHX has a hidden metric that doesn't show up at first glance. It runs at a 2.54% dividend yield with a 6.2% share appreciation. But its 5-year dividend growth rate is a massive 16.98%. The international fund I wanted to skip had the fastest growing dividend. Now that the tools are on the table, let's look at the first allocation. This is the dividend tilted portfolio, and I weighted it like this. I put 50% into FTIHX, the international fund. I put 30% into FDVV and left just 20% in FNCMX for growth. You might wonder why the international fund gets the biggest slice. Because that 16.98% dividend growth rate acts as a long-term engine. FDVV gets 30% to produce immediate cash flow today. FNCMX is kept at 20% just to keep the portfolio from stalling out. Blended together, this setup creates a 2.2% yield. The dividend growth rate is 13.13%, with a 9.14% share appreciation. Based on these historical assumptions, here is the 30-year trek. After year 1, your $10,000 is worth $11,134. By year 10, it reaches a projected $30,453. By year 20, the model shows it growing to $113,773. And by year 30, the total balance hits $416,613. But the total balance isn't the main headline here. Before I show you the income, we need to clarify how the math works. That $2,048 figure comes from the projected future dividend stream after 30 years. It factors in dividend growth and reinvestment, not just today's basic yield. In year 30, this portfolio is projected to pay $2,048 every single month. That is a steady stream of projected income hitting your account. About $255,000 came from share prices going up. The other $151,000 came entirely from automatic dividend reinvestment. The income side of the portfolio generated 37% of the total growth. Now let's look at the exact opposite design. This version doesn't care about a monthly check during the accumulation phase. It is built strictly to chase the largest final balance. The asset weights flip almost completely. I put 70% into FNCMX, 20% into FDVV, and just 10% into FTIHX. We are riding that 17.45% NASDAQ growth rate as hard as possible. International exposure drops down to a minor 10% hedge. With these weights, the portfolio runs at a lower 1.15% blended yield, but the annual share appreciation jumps to 14.67%. Here is what that growth-heavy engine looks like over time. After year 1, you have $11,582. It looks identical to the income version. That is why many people give up early. They don't see the divergence. By year 10, the gap opens up at a projected $42,454. By year 20, you are sitting on $173,989. And by year 30, the growth portfolio climbs to a massive $699,558. Almost 98% of that growth came purely from stock prices going up. Because the yield was low, there was very little dividend reinvestment. It is a massive mountain of wealth, but it is money on paper. Based on this model's projected future dividend stream, the automatic income is much lower. Not simply the current yield multiplied by the final balance. The automatic cash flow here is dramatically lower than the income portfolio. That is the stark contrast of asset allocation. Look at both portfolios sitting next to each other now. Same initial $10,000. Same 30 years on the clock. The income design gives you $400 or $16,613 and projects $2,048 a month. The growth design gives you a total of $699,558. But the automatic cash flow it generates is tiny by comparison. So let me ask you the most important question here. Would you rather own the bigger account or the account that sends you more cash? Some people will look at the $699,000 and bring up the 4% rule. Living off 4% of that larger account equals roughly $2,332 a month. On paper, that seems to beat the dividend portfolio's payout. But here is what changes when you move from theory to real life. The income comes from cash distributions, so you rely less on selling shares directly. With the growth portfolio, you must actively sell shares to pay yourself. And if the market drops the exact year you choose to retire, you are forced to sell your declining shares at a loss just to live. That sequence of returns risk is one reason large accounts can become more fragile than they look. Looking back now, I do not think either path is automatically right. They are simply built for two very different seasons of life. When you are young, the larger final balance may matter more. You still have time, income, and the patience to survive volatility. But closer to retirement, the questions become more personal. You stop asking only how large the account can become. You start asking how calmly it can support your everyday life. That is why this experiment mattered so much to me. The best portfolio is not always the biggest one on paper. It is the one designed for the life you actually want to live. Retirement is not lived inside a spreadsheet or projection model. It is lived month by month, bill by bill, and decision by decision. If you want to see how I would turn this into an automated monthly investing system, I break down the accounts and the exact setup process in the video on screen now. Watch it right here, and I will see you there.